We will put a panel Zoom together. That's on our list. So welcome. And the panels are panels on what to do with your panel.
Awesome.
It's something for everybody that it might be of interest. One of the people that's on here a lot is Bob Capiola. He's been a Comanche person for probably 30 years. He's got his 250 that he's selling because he bought a twin basket case, which he won't talk about it, but he spent 2.5 years rebuilding it, putting it back together, making a new instrument panel, putting the engines on, which had been, what do you call that, when they're all sealed up, and getting it painted. And now he's in love with his twin and working on selling the single. So if anybody knows, if anybody wants a really good single maintained by a guy who knows more about it than the AMPs, he might need somebody to contact. He's here on and off.
Okay, Robert Capiola, did you say?
Capiola, yes. He
okay.
took this basket case that had been in a hangar for, I think, 24 years, pieces and parts are all over, and put it back together, got it signed off. And like I said, he redesigned the instrument panel, made it all digital, and got everything signed off. He's also an asset for Comanche information or knowledge. I'm done.
Okay, I'm going to break in here because it's time for Ron to do his thing. I'm going to mute everybody for now. You will have a chance to unmute if you need to talk, but it's time for Ron to do his thing. So Ron, unmute yourself and have at it.
Okay.
I would suggest everybody go to the speaker view.
Yep. And unusually on this, this is CJ again. Unusually on this, Ron said, go ahead and unmute and ask questions if he's going too fast or you have a question. Usually we ask people to post to the chat window. And I said to Ron, try to go slow so those of us with our iPads and ForeFlight can follow you. But not so slow we can't get through it. Welcome, Ron, and thank you so much for doing this for us.
You're welcome. Is everybody seeing this? Hello?
Not yet.
Not yet.
You're not seeing anything?
Not yet.
Well.
We see you now.
Yeah.
Not yet. We all met and rehearsed this last night.
There we go.
There it is. Perfect.
Okay. Now do you see?
We just lost it. We had it and it went away.
Says I need to reboot the device.
Uh-oh. We could talk about panels while you do that.
Let's see what happens.
There we go. Coming back.
Okay. Still there?
Yeah, click on, there we go. Now we're showing it.
Do you see a document?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not going to spend too much time on the PowerPoint. I'll spend more time on the ForeFlight. But I'll talk about some new features, and I can't keep up with all the new features anymore. They come out so many so fast. I'll go through a pre-flight planning, and I think my favorite trip is down to Fort Worth Alliance, down near you, Bob Cretney, because I got a daughter that lives near Dallas. And so I'll show how I pre-flight with ForeFlight for that trip, how I plan it, and then I'll actually show flying it, and then talk a little bit about arrival and departure procedures as well as approach procedures. And I won't spend too much time on ADS-B in devices. I think everybody's probably has something like that by now. Definitely, if you're flying, you have ADS-B out. And then as I'm going through that, you can ask questions if I'm moving too fast for you or too slow. Let me know, and we'll see how it goes. And I'll show you some of these, but ForeFlight has added a lot of stuff in the flight view. You can you put your route in there. You can pack. So if you're taking a trip across the country and you normally don't download certain states, when you hit pack, it will pack everything you need for that flight. All the en route charts, the WAC charts or sectionals, the approach plates, the arrival departure procedures, weather information, NOTAM information, all the airport information, and so on. The flight log keeps changing, and the information on the map view and the flight planning view continually change. NOTAMs are given to you when you go to an approach or a page for an airport that shows its runways. Now in the MOS, or the Model Output Statistics Forecast, which is my favorite forecast because it's more optimistic than the standard forecast. They keep adding more information to that. And a few other things. So let's talk about before you even start your planning, you need to configure your aircraft in ForeFlight. Always start out in the maps view. Down at the bottom, for those of you that are looking at your iPad, I hit the More button, and window comes up and I can hit Aircraft. So then for the aircraft, you can figure in your tail number, serial number, the type, your weight and balance. Now, ForeFlight will put in a performance profile for you. I find that it seems to me like I have a 250 and they're giving me 180 information. So I've edited the profiles to more match my plane, but they will put profiles in for you. You can put in your best glide speed, best glide ratio, default cruise altitudes that you use, and then you could put in your weight and balance information, your empty weight, where your CG is, and so on. So you fill all this stuff out for your plane. Now, some people have problems, I know I did in the beginning, with the ICAO flight plans and ICAO equipment for the plane. You know, FAA equipment, if you have a GPS, it's /golf. ICAO equipment, there's ICAO equipment, there's ICAO surveillance, and there's ICAO performance-based navigation. So as far as equipment, if you have a WASP-based GPS, then you can do LPV approaches, and that is B. If you have a WASP-based GPS, you have GNSS, and that is G. And if you have a WASP GPS, you are approved for performance-based navigation. And if you have VOR and ILS, That's it. So you got R and S. And if you have anything else, you can put Z in. So most of us, if you have a WASP GPS and it also has nav capability with ILS localizer as well as VORs, you would be Bravo Golf Romeo Sierra, BGRS, for ICAO equipment. For ICAO surveillance, and this is going to depend on what kind of transponder you have and what kind of ADS-B out you have. So I have a normal Mode C transponder. It's a Garmin GTX 327. And I have a UAT, that's a Garmin GDL 88. So for the transponder, I'll go back up here to, is C for Mode C transponder. And for the ADS-B in and out, it's U2. So for the surveillance equipment on mine, it's C and U2. If you have 1090 in and out, you would be using B2 for your transponder instead of C and U2. And so that's if you had the Garmin GTX 345 or VL3 or equivalent from anybody else. Weight category, we're light. We're under 15,500 pounds. And ICAO performance-based navigation. And this, you got to kind of take my word for it. If you have a WASP GPS, you're B2, C2, and D2. And ForeFlight has just come out with some information to make that easier, but I used flightplan.com to originally figure out how to set the ICAO flight plans. And then I was able to put that information into ForeFlight. So you get all this information in, you've now defined your aircraft. Also, you can put in weight and balance information for your aircraft. And for every flight, I put in what's in the plane for that flight. And this satisfies FAA requirements for that weight and balance. And not only do you load it, you put your load of everything that you have in it, your fuel, your passengers, your pilot, co-pilot, any luggage. It puts it on a graph for you, shows you where your CG is and where it will be when you've burned all your fuel. So you can see the line that goes from the little green square down to the kind of grayed out area. That's the line that will follow as you burn fuel. So I'm going to start across the top and show, and I'm going to go to an area in Michigan, but I'll try to expand the map some. So you can see if you're over on the East Coast, you got some weather. And we don't have hardly any in Michigan. One of the things, you hit this overlay, the top left, and you can pick which map you want. You can look at VFR sectional, you can look at aerial map, street map, IFR low, IFR high if you're so inclined, and even Caribbean and Mexico low altitude And here's what happens if you change it to IFR. So those are the maps. I usually keep it on the sectional to start out with because it shows me cities and state lines and things like that. As you go over a little farther, you have the flight plan page. And just for grins, I'm going to put in a flight plan from my airport, which is Delta 95. Oh, and instead of switching from alpha to numeric, the little numbers over the top row of letters, if you pull those down, you can get the number. That would have been a T if I just hit it, but by pulling it down, I got 5. And I don't remember Fort Worth Alliance. I'm sure it's one of my favorites. KFW. Okay. I'll put that in, and I want to check to see which profile, because it's probably has the wrong profile for me. Now I can tell it when I want to take off. You notice on the flight plan pop-up, you have the airplane, and I have my airplane there. You have the basic performance, you have an altitude, and then over to the right, there's procedures, routes, and estimated time of departure. So it's important to tell when you want to do it. So let's say I want to do this tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. So it will figure out what the winds and everything is at 7 a.m. tomorrow. It says it's going to, and then I go to altitude. It looks like, the lower altitudes will give me a better tailwind, but higher altitudes tend to give me better fuel burn. So probably start out at the 6,000, and at some point I'll want to go to 10 or 12,000. But for this, we'll look at the 15 knot tailwind is kind of nice. I'd hate to pass that up. And certainly for most of the trip, that's plenty high enough. So that says 5 hours and 10 minutes for the flight, and it takes 63.7 gallons. Now, ForeFlight will suggest some routes. I'm really not interested in their routes specifically. Other than I do like to put VORs in the flight plan. So this one here says 5 hours and 9 minutes, which I don't believe, but I'm going to select that route because it's straight. And about all that did is it added a bunch of VOR waypoints to the trip. And that has a couple of advantages. One is if you do have a GPS outage somewhere, which doesn't happen as much now as it used to, but every now and then, I think the government purposely blanks out certain areas of GPS, because I've gone through areas where I had no GPS signals, and then a little farther, they came back again. But if that's the case, if you have the VORs, you could still continue to fly the flight in IFR conditions. Then this little, well, I'll start at the bottom left of the little dialog box here. It gives you distance, estimated time en route, estimated time of arrival. So if I took off at 7 a.m., I would get to Dallas, Fort Worth at 11:10 Central Time, 63 gallons of fuel, 15 knots tailwind. This thing that looks like a globe is actually a synthetic vision, and that will show you on your trip what it looks like. And that's using, you know, maps like Google Earth. If I come down here long enough, you can see the airport that I'm taking off from is there. And can't see the skyline of Detroit, but you could start to see the lakes off to the left there. The next button is the pack button. Now, whether I've got the right maps loaded or not, this will load what I need. Now, I load all the maps in the US anyway, so they don't need to give me maps. But if I didn't, they would have. But it'll give me up-to-date weather, TFRs, SIGMETs, AirMets, fuel prices, and NOTAMs. So I'll hit pack, and it usually doesn't take very long. Okay, so that's packed. We're in the edit mode. You can go to an epilogue mode, and it will show you what we used to fill out by hand for each leg. It does automatically for you. And then you can look at profile. And this shows you, you know, am I going to be in trouble altitude-wise? And all we're seeing here is airspace and airports. And the fuzz at the bottom is the ground. So we're not, even at that altitude, since we're staying away from the Appalachians or the Rockies, we don't have a problem with hitting any earth that's coming up to our altitude. Oops. And then we'll go back to edit. Now we've got a time, we've got an idea of what the trip would look like. We can look at the map and see what the weather looks like. And as you're flying, you can hit this arrow and actually down below where it shows the time for the weather. And it will actually show you the last 53 minutes what the weather's doing. And that's very helpful while you're flying, because now you can see what it's been doing and get a good idea of what it's going to be like when you get there. You know, is it popping up? Is it going away? Is it dissipating? Are there more yellows and reds than when you started? And so on and so forth. I try to stay out of red areas. Let's see if we expand this. The yellow and the green are usually, well, the green is just a little slight rain. Yellow is heavier rain. Orange is heavy rain. And red, if I go into the red area, my radios will hiss at me, and I'll see some little balls of fire around the ends of my wings sometimes. I don't go through magenta, and I stay away from lightning, and definitely a long way away from hail. Now, we haven't even gone to the forecast yet, but we can look at, while we're flying, we can look at icing. And let's stop this guy. So I went to the overlay and I clicked Icing US. And you can see where you start to see little light blues. That's at 13,000 feet. You know, it's 6,000. I'm probably not going to get any icing anywhere on this trip. If you were up at starting to get into flight levels, you see that down there at Fort Worth at 19,000, there's some icing. 18, even a little bit of 15. 13, it looks like you're okay. 14 looks like you're okay. And you can do this while you're flying too. This is information that's available in the air. We can look at winds. I'll look at winds aloft. So again, the winds, you can, I'll come down near to the 6,000. And that basically shows what the winds are at 6,000, which we knew we had a little tailwind. As you go higher, the winds are going to change. But you can adjust that slider to see what the winds are. Again, you can do that while you're flying also. Now, the other thing I do is Dallas-Fort Worth is in my flight plan. So I'm going to want to store in a binder a bunch of information for Dallas-Fort Worth. KFW, is that what it was? Or for Fort Worth Alliance. So I'll put a ForeFlight diagram, an airport diagram. I'll probably load all of the arrival procedures. Excuse me, those were departure procedures and the arrival procedures. And then the approaches, I'm not Cat 2 or 3, so I'm not going to worry about that. But the ILSs for 16 and 3-4, the GPSs. So now I've saved in a binder the approaches, the arrivals, and the departure procedures for Dallas-Fort Worth, or Fort Worth Alliance. And if, when I'm flying there, instead of trying to look around and find that and look it up and browse for it and all that, I can just go to plates and it's going to be there. Next, I go to Imagery, and you could pick whatever you want for featured. This shows current flight categories. The next one is the the latest surface analysis. And then the next one is today's forecast. And you can see coming out of the thumb of Michigan, I'm not going to be in weather until I get to Arkansas. So I can sleep for most of the flight. Back to imagery. You can look at the prog charts, pick the time that you're going to be flying. This is valid at OOZ tomorrow, so we said we were going to go around 8 o'clock. 06 on Friday. So you can actually look at the prog charts every 6 hours and get an idea of what's happening. Significant weather outlook, convective outlooks, severe storm watches, tornado probability, wind probability, hail probability. Unless you're over in the Pacific Northwest, it doesn't look like you have a problem with that. And then convective forecasts, 4 hour, 6 hour, and 8 hour. So this I would look at the night before. Looks like only over on the East Coast here. Continental US cloud cover, 3 hour increments up to 18 hours. Surface, continental US, up to 18 hours. Winds aloft, surface to 12,000 feet. And this is going to be current. Graphical air mets, Sierra and Zulu air mets. So, and Tango, so you got winds, icing, and turbulence. Segments. Convective, and there's some south of Dallas, but a little bit in that area. Icing, none. Turbulence, none. IFR, none. And some rain, maybe even thunderstorms. And this icing information is good to look at in the wintertime. It's this time of the year, it's not too bad. Turbulence, and then satellite, visible and infrared. That's the infrared satellites. Here's over Detroit. Doppler radar, regional static radar and looping radar for different regions. So there's the Great Lake area. And we can do looping. Ceiling and visibility analysis. Austin, Texas. So there's a lot of information here that's available. And then the other thing you can do, go back to the maps page here, and I'll go to airports, and we'll pick the airport we're taking off from. If we look at the weather, remember the MOS forecast, which now in the forecast gives you temperatures and dew points. But then for the forecast, let's see. That's interesting. We can look at what a forecast discussion. In this discussion, if you call flight service, most likely they'll be reading this to you. VFR flying conditions will prevail through the TAF period as cool and stable high pressure builds in the central Great Lakes, blah, blah, blah. They'll be reading that. So you can call them up and get that, or you can see it right here. And again, this is available while you're flying also. So if something changed or if you didn't get it, it's there. And we go down to Dallas, Fort Worth. And we can pick anywhere in between too. And we can look at their terminal area forecasts. MOS. MOS I like because it shows more VFR. And we can look at the discussion for the Dallas Fort Worth area. So now if we have, this time of the year, thunderstorms are a concern, high winds, high buildups that may be getting high enough for ice, like hail. So we take a real good look at those kind of things, make sure that nothing like that. But once we've decided that we're happy with the forecast during the period that we're going to fly, it looks like it's something we want to do, then we can go to the next. We go to, and I'll do this slowly. We bring down the flight plan dialog box, and they always have this little box with the arrow out if you want to send something somewhere. So we hit that, and we want to send this route to flights. We'll go over here to flights, and it already has, because we filled it in, the time we're going to take off, our departure, and destination airports, and even the route is in there with the various VORs and the cruising altitude. So this was where we could make any changes to that. But we can also hit briefing here, and it will retrieve a briefing, and it'll look at all the weather products that are available. And it stores that on your iPad, so you can look at this as you're flying and see what your briefing was. The other thing it does is it sends you an email with a copy of the briefing, which then meets the FAA requirements for information that you need for your flight. And you have an email copy of it that's proof that, yeah, I did get that briefing. And it's got all the different products here. You just keep going on and on. So then if you like that route, you can, at this point, you decide, how many passengers do I have, and what's my cargo. I'll fill the baggage compartment. And then you can proceed to file by hitting the button down there. Now, when you're flying, you get to pick the type of flight. Since the last flight I filed for was a military flight, I would have to go back here to general aviation. You pick the aircraft that you're going to use. And since I can't change my ADS-B transponder, I put in my Coast Guard call sign. And if it's a Wings of Mercy or Angel Flight, I put in that call sign, because my UAT or my ADS-B transponder is always going to put out the 7274 Papa. But I can put in an optional call sign, and then I usually put a note in the notes section, you know, this is Wings of Mercy, or this is Coast Guard, or this is Angel Flight, or whatever it is. So that's where I have an option to do that. I can also, at this point, I could change the time, I could change the altitude if I wanted to. Tells me my flight, my time en route, my fuel aboard. At this point, I could hit file and file the flight plan. I'm not going to add another flight plan to ATC right now, but if I did, well, I'll go ahead and do it. Why not? Okay, it says it's filed, and it should come back up in a little bit later and say it was accepted. We'll give it a chance to do that. Okay, your flight plan has been acknowledged. Not accepted, but acknowledged. And then if ATC wanted to make a change, you know, at some point it'll say accepted, or it'll say, here's some changes to it. It'll send those to me, and I can accept those or not accept them. If I accept them, they go into my flight plan, and they become part of this flight plan. I'm going to cancel this because, like I said, I don't want to add too much stuff to it. It's not going to really happen. So I'm going to cancel my flight plan. And I just did. Now I can take this information and I can share it in PDF. I can share it with another person that has ForeFlight. And I can also go back to the map. If I'd made changes to it, that would correct the map view. So go back up to the top here, and next to flight plan, there's a thing that looks like a gear. That's all the settings for your flight plan or for your ForeFlight map. The theme you want, what you want terrain to look like. You want to have the ability to place labels in it. Cultural elements. Major roads, minor roads, railroads, urban areas, forests, national parks, points of interest. You can add whatever you want to that. I try to keep uncluttered if I can. How do you like to track? Everybody has an opinion. I use north up because to me, this replaces the maps I used to carry. And so up is north on the map. So up is north on this map. You can pick a lot of map overlays. I do have the glide setting, and I use 90 knots, 13:1 glide ratio. It's got distance rings, glide advisor, map annotations, marked positions, track logs, and so on. And then you can also change radar and TFR opacity. So I can make them real dark or make them a lot lighter. And if you notice around North Carolina, it's how it's changing. And I usually pick something that gets my attention, but I can see what's underneath it. And the next one over is a split screen. If you're flying with well, in my case, it's a flight stream, and it doesn't matter if it's a 210 or the 510, they have a built-in 8A hearse. And that is an electronic six-pack, basically. And it's probably as quick, if not quicker, than your gyro instruments. It's not GPS derived, it's actually derived by electronic accelerometers. If you have a Stratus or any of the other ADS-B in devices that will broadcast to your ForeFlight on your iPad, most of them have a hearse built in. So when you do the split screen here, this can actually replace your HSI and your attitude indicator, and also your vertical speed, your altimeter, and your airspeed. Well, ground speed, doesn't know your airspeed, but your ground speed. But if you had a vacuum system failure, this could save your bacon by providing you what your vacuum instruments were doing. In the case when I'm flying on a long trip, I will take my Stratus, which is battery operated. My 210 uses ship's power, my Flightstream 210. And if I lost my vacuum pump, my Flightstream 210 can drive the screen on the iPad. If I lost ship's power, my Stratus, which is battery powered, my iPad, which is battery powered, could provide me these instruments and this map, which definitely could get me, to a place where there's VFR weather and I go down and land. The next one over is a bunch of information on the lower part of your iPad. And these are all programmable. You can pick whatever you want for these. So I have distance to destination, estimated time en route to the destination. How much longer we got to go, Dad? Ground speed, GPS altitude, track, accuracy based on GPS, vertical speed, and current coordinates in a form that's easy to identify. And again, each of these you can change and make them whatever you want. And here's the choice. And all I did was just touched one of those. I touched the ground speed one. So you have all of these choices of what you want there. Now, if you have the fancy Stratus, I noticed the one item here was cabin pressure. That would feed information to this to tell you what your cabin pressure is. And then this last button is your favorites. So these are favorite routes, so that you can just pick a route that you've saved from a previous flight, and it's already ready to be put in there. And it also has recents. So how am I doing time-wise?
Well, you're doing just fine. You got about 15 minutes or so for your hour.
Okay, and everything's coming through okay?
Yep.
Okay, when I'm flying en route, I like to play a lot of games. You know, I'll spread this out and I'll look at weather, different locations. Like I could come down here to Fort Wayne. And we could look at, you know, what's current weather at Fort Wayne, what's their forecast, what's the winds at Fort Wayne, because I'm flying near there. I'm flying at 6,000. Is it still favorable for me? So I can do those kind of things as I'm flying along. I can look at South Bend. I can pick an airport closer to me. I can look at fuel prices, which are also live while you're flying. And if I, usually about halfway through the flight, I look at my fuel computer and see, okay, how much fuel am I going to have at destination? I remember that destination, you know, there was some weather down there. Do I want to pick a spot and stop for fuel and make a fuel stop before I get there? So this gives me, you know, here's a guy here at $3.75 a gallon. I like those low fuel prices. What kind of an airport is that? Does it look like does it have approaches? So I can take a look at that airport. And it's Mountain View, Missouri. So it's got 5,000 foot runway, good asphalt. And it's got 2 GPS approaches. And they're LP, so they're not great, but they get down to 500, 600 feet. And the weather is mostly VFR there, so that's not bad. Let's look at 2.8, and that's also an LP. And since Garmin would probably provide vertical guidance. So if you had an autopilot, you could fly that approach, even the vertical part, with your autopilot. So that's a possibility if I thought I had to stop for gas on the way down. On the left side here, there's a thing that looks kind of like a string with 3 knots in it. That's a route signal. If you hit that, that shows your route all on one page. And now I can get rid of that 100 OLED thing, and I'm going to get rid of user waypoints too. Over here, you can either pinch and squeeze with your hand to change the resolution of the screen, or you can hit plus and minus buttons over here. If we decided we like that, I have to find it in that mountain view. Which is right here. I can come over here on the left side and hit that thing that looks like a pen. And I can pick whatever color I want and how thick I want that line to be. And I like that red line, so I'll pick the red. I can draw a circle around here and maybe even put an F there. So now I've got an annotation for that if I need to get fuel. It's on my map. I can keep that there and it'll stay there as long as I have the iPad, or I can clear it, clear annotations and get rid of it. Now the other thing, as I'm getting closer and I've looked at the weather and I've determined what they're using, they usually say which runway they're using for ILS and so on and so forth. So I can go to my plates and pick the Fort Worth Alliance plate or binder and come down here. And I don't know if they're going to ask me to use an arrival procedure yet. A lot of times they do, they almost always do going out of there. But let's say that the winds are favoring, they're using ILS 3-4 right. So I can bring up that plate and I have the option. I can put the plate, turn my iPad and put the plate on the iPad and hit the lock button, which is top right. Looks like a padlock. And then I can wiggle it around. It's not supposed to move. And I just use my iPad as if it were just an approach plate. Or I can say, go to this send to and say, send that to the map. Now that will go down there and that will put that approach procedure on my moving map display. Oops. Let's turn off the annotations for now. So as I'm still in cruise and I'm getting close to the airport and I'm getting the ATIS information, I'm also, you can also come down here before you even are close enough to get the ATIS. And I got too many favorites here. Find that airport and determine, okay, what's the weather there? What's the weather going to be there when I get there? 10 at 9 knots. So maybe I don't want to use 3-4. Maybe I would if it's runway 10, maybe I like runway 16 better. So we'll put that in there. And when you're pretty sure that that is the route that you're going to be using, then you can start briefing yourself for that route. And part of that briefing, and I don't know if you guys use JEP charts. I always use the NOS stuff, so I'm very familiar with what ForeFlight has here because that's the same. I just start at the top here and you look at this information here. This is an ILS 16. What's the frequency for the localizer? 110.15. Now's the time to put that in the radio, or at least in the standby in the radio. What's the approach course? 166 degrees. What's the touchdown zone altitude for 16 left? So that verifies that you got your radios set up. Again, you're doing this while you're still in cruise. You're not in approach mode yet. You're not, you have some time, and you can make sure that you have this stuff right. And then the other thing is I look at, okay, how am I going to enter this approach? Is it, am I going to enter at the initial fix here? And am I going to be able to make that turn, or do I need a procedure turn? So, I would be entering it probably there, and they'll probably would give me vectors if they don't give me an arrival procedure. They'll probably put me there. And then I always tell everybody to look at your missed approach procedure. And what are you going to do on missed approach? You're going to climb 1200, make a right turn to 330, climb to 3000, then go to Oblong, or whatever that is. And I always assume I'm going to have a missed approach. And the exception is I get to land. And that way I'm never surprised if it is a missed approach. And then of course you determine your time. And whether you're doing 90 knots or 120 knots, and depending, going into Fort Worth Alliance is probably going to be more like the 120 knot, because they usually want you to keep your speed up. So you get ready to time what you need, and you need to know your decision height. And either program that into your altitude reminder or make a note of it. And again, this is all right there at the end of your route. And as you get closer, it gets bigger, and you'll be able to watch your little airplane fly the approach. And I'll go back here. I'm gonna get rid of this. And let me get rid of the annotations. Oops. If you had an arrival in there, excuse me. Now trying to remember the last one I had. Okay. So let's say it's a Sassy 6 arrival. You can come here to procedures. And you can pick one of these arrivals. And you're probably going to know your transition if you're coming, you know, that's our route coming down there. So the transition would probably be FSM. And you can add that to your route if you want. And that's what that looks like. And then you could add the approach, which we said was ILS 16 left, I think we said. And add that to the route. Now, most likely they will vector you to argue instead of taking you all the way over to UKW. But if they're real busy, you might get stuck with that. I know I've had times where I seem to be flying west quite a ways, and then finally they vector me down in for that flight. My advice on both your navigator and on here is never add an approach that says vectors. Always add the full approach. You can always fly the vectors. If you put the full approach in, you have all the waypoints. If you put vectors, it's only going to give you the final approach course. So that's some things you can do with the with approaches. And we'll get that out of there. And we can go back here to the flight plan and we can delete this stuff. Now you've got scratch pads, and you can create a scratch pad that has your clearance, how you receive your clearance. I'm old school, so I always write down CVMDS, which is the same thing. And this is the cleared to, and this is via, this would be the route. Climb and maintain, they always say climb and maintain. This is altitude. And usually 3,000, expect 10,000 in 10 minutes. Departure frequency, 118.8, and squawk 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can write down your clearance and whatever you use to memorize. ATC always talks in the same way. So everything is in this sequence. So you know what to expect. Even if you don't hear it real good, you can probably make it out. And you can create a checklist for your airplane. Now you can get ForeFlight will create one for you. If they know our Comanches, so they can create one. You can make changes to it. You can come in here and edit it, and change wording, add stuff, subtract stuff, delete stuff, whatever you want to do. But you got your pre-flight inspection before starting engine, before taxi, taxiing, run up, takeoff, before takeoff, takeoff, climb, cruising, descent, approach and landing. And they do have, here's some abnormal stuff, starting when hot, starting when flooded, starting with external power, short field and obstacle clearance, short field takeoff, short field landing, soft field landing, go around, and emergency. Engine power loss during takeoff. Land straight ahead, airspeed safe, landing gear as required, flaps as required. Engine power loss during flight. Best glide speed. They say 87 knots, 90 knots from all the testing I've done works for my plane. Plus it's easier to see it on the 90 knots and 105 mile an hour match. But again, you have this, you can have it speak, or you can check off as you go through it if you want to use their checklist. We kind of went through weight and balance. They have a logbook feature, and it will put data in from a track log that you from your flights. I don't use that. I'm still using paper, but I may at some point use the logbook. There's no reason not to. Custom content, you can put in user waypoints, and I'll show you an example. If you're flying over something, you know, Bob, you're out flying around north of Dallas, and you see something up here by Denton that you like, or wherever you are, you can actually, you hit this button here. Let me go back to that. It's a teardrop below the pencil on the left side of the screen. That'll create a mark. Let's go back here. And you can name that that mark. You know, this is Bob's favorite restaurant. And any note you want to put there is, you know, great burgers. And save that. Now that'll save that as one of your user waypoints. And if you come here at custom content, oh no, that's saved that as an annotation, excuse me. That got saved as an annotation. And I couldn't get right on it. The other thing is if you're given a waypoint of a place to go, you can feed in the lat long of that waypoint, the name of it, and it gives you some example ways to put that in. It can be north and west lat long based on 2 different formats. It can be a radio off of a VOR, radio and a distance. And so if somebody gives you, you know, here's that long, I want you to fly to this, or this airport is at this place, or whatever, you can create a waypoint there and then save it. You can import custom map layers. And you can import custom charts. And I know some of the guys that are flying for the Coast Guard actually have some of the charts for navigating on the waters. And I'm going to take questions now. Anybody have something else they'd like to see, or? And I don't have the ability to have this on and look at anything you're sending, so I need to hear it. CJ, is anybody
Yep.
talk about
I
any
have
questions or anything?
well, I'd like to go through some of the comments because I think they're going to actually inspire people to ask questions, and also because people had some pretty great commentary. So what I'm going to do, in case anybody's curious, is just run through the chat window as people were sort of making comments and suggestions related to ForeFlight. And starting, of course, with Eric's wind prediction warning, which is not built into ForeFlight yet, but you know, we will be putting in an Eric Jones special feature, I'm sure, soon.
Well, we just want a forecast of where he's flying and when.
You know, he's kind enough to share that with us. So the other way to find out where Eric's going to go fly is find out where dogs need new homes, and he'll be there helping out.
Okay, you know, Eric, thank you for what you do. I love dogs. I love animals. And that's great what you do for them.
Yeah. So let's see. A couple of comments that had to do with ForeFlight. People were trading back and forth on avionics upgrades. By the way, as I said, Ron's done our panels where we're trying to figure out what to put into the panels of our Comanches as we try to upgrade them from wherever we happen to inherit them. And because Ron created and ran a pretty successful avionics shop for many years. And so Ron, you're now my crosshairs to get onto another panel because there were so many questions.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing thing. Let's see. So I'm scrolling down and here we go. Okay, a couple of things. Chris Cotton worked for ForeFlight for a couple of years, so he had a couple of comments as he went along that were really helpful. He said a couple of things. Are you using Performance Plus or Pro package, Ron?
Let me tell you.
And that question came from Mark Sullivan because he's got the Pro package and he's not sure he's got all of the same features that you have. And this is just a question for everybody. If you've got Performance Plus or Pro.
I have ForeFlight Performance Plus.
Got it. What is the additional cost for Performance Plus versus Pro? If anybody knows, jump in.
It might have been $50 extra. Might have went from $149 to $199 a year.
Gotcha.
You know, it pays automatically, so unless I go look and see what they out, I don't know. I don't know if I want to know.
Right.
I know it's cheaper than buying all the plates and maps and charts and everything that I need every 28 days.
Yeah. Yep. So Chris Cotton gave us a. Oh, go ahead, Bob.
I think it's $100 a year.
Say again, Bob.
I don't know if you're gonna. This is Bob. I think it's $100 a year extra for the Pro. But if you don't have Pro, you're not going to be able to get the ARs.
It is 100 more. It goes to $299 from $199. I looked it up on the web here.
Okay, to get Pro Plus.
Performance Plus, yes.
Performance Plus, yeah. And I'll tell you what, Performance Plus had some things like the digital ATIS was one. It was kind of nice. And at some point, you're supposed to be able to get the clearance, digital clearance. So if you put, you got a flight plan in and you're at certain airports, like Detroit is one of them in this area. I was at Detroit. I could get my clearance without having to call up and get the clearance. It just would come to me on the iPad. And I
Cool.
thought that's a nice feature. I haven't used it yet, but because I'm never at those airports. I stick with regional and smaller GA airports that have good approaches.
Very cool. And I'm just gonna, because, so a bunch of people have been looking this up and posting into the Zoom window, the chat window. But for those who are here from dial-in or haven't yet located the chat window, just a couple of pieces of information that just came in. So Pro is $199, Performance Plus is $299 a year, and there's a Basic Plus. Eric, is that right? That's $99. If you want to unmute and jump in, please do. And then let's see, Eric just added the Performance Plus editions, which are Advanced Flight Planning, which is what, Ron? Cotton had to leave, or I'd ask him.
Well, the advanced flight planning, I think, are some of those other features, like the one feature I think you need the plus for is where you can look at the plan view of your flight and the obstructions that you're going to fly through.
I think they call it synthetic vision.
Well, synthetic vision is another one. Let me go back to the.
But I believe you're going to have the plus
here
to get that.
The profile view.
Yeah. Well, actually,
I think you need the plus to get this. You need the plus to get this profile view, and then that other thing.
And I think the same with AHARS. I think you got to have plus to get AHARS.
I thought that came with a basic. The AHARS. I think they add more features to the AHARS with the plus, but I think you can get the plus with the.
Well, I'm going to jump in with an awesome tip from Andrew Borden then before we go digging into this too much more. Andrew just said if you sign up for safepilots.org, you're going to save 30% on it, although you'll pay $45 for the Safe Pilots membership. But he said it saved him $99 on Performance Plus, a net $55 savings. He says, I'll take what I can get.
Here's another feature that you need Performance Plus for. Here's the aerial view of Fort Worth Alliance, showing the left and right runways. That's 16 left, that's 34 right.
Yeah, that's three-dimensional.
Right. That's kind of neat.
That is cool.
Up for every airport. And that's a Performance Plus feature.
Where do you go to find that, Ron?
Where on the iPad?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The number of places. So you're flying along. You can go to the airport. Just click on the airport itself and bring up the full screen for the airport. And on that screen, the top right, there's a 3D view, FBOs, taxiways, comments. You get the 3D view, pick the runway that you're going to be landing on, and it gives you the view for that runway.
I don't see that. Oh, here it is. Okay, I got you.
Okay. Then also, when you look at the runway, if you go to the runway view here, and there's always more than one way to get to any of these things. But if I'm looking at the airport and the runways, it's telling me the best wind is 34, and it's either 34 right or 34 left, whichever one I want to use. That's with the wind conditions. You don't even have to try and figure out the wind and crosswind and all that stuff. This just tells you, use 34,
How
Well,
dynamically does that update?
I'll tell you another big plus of of that runway feature is that if that runway has right traffic, it's in big red letters and it says right traffic.
Right, and yeah, you notice that on 16R, right traffic. It tells you. And 16L is also right traffic.
Oh, wow.
So, that's good to know.
Yeah. Now, Chris Cotton had a quick note for those of you using Performance Plus. So again, Chris Cotton worked for ForeFlight for 2 years, and he said with Performance Plus, you will want to make sure you're using the correct performance profile. This is a common error. He said everything is ICAO now, so no longer able to do it the old school way. And he said under other information, don't forget 260B. He says ForeFlight has it in the filing pilot's guide. Go ahead.
When you talk about when you identify your aircraft.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Ron, I have a question.
Okay.
How did you get that overlay of the approach plate on the VFR chart sectional?
Okay. There's a couple ways of doing that. From the flight plan page, the flight plan drop down, you can go to procedure over on the right side. You can say, okay, approach into there, and we decide, well, it says best wind is 3-4, so let's just pick ILS 3-4. I can hit that, I can say add it to my route, and that'll put it on there. And that'll actually take me to the, you notice, to the initial fix, which is UCOL. Obviously,
this is
not
Pat
going to be able to make it. That puts it right on there. To get rid of it, you hit the little round gear to the top left of the plate and say hide plate. You could also, from plates, go ahead.
Bob,
Where is that procedure?
Bob, this is Pat Donovan. The only way you get to show the approach plates on the map is if you have the Pro Plus, which gives you geo-referenced plates.
Which I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the plate, the sectional now, and on ForeFlight. And where do you go to find that procedure button?
Okay, Bob, up at the top, the FPL or the flight plan button.
Yeah.
Push that. You should get the drop down. Now over to the right-hand top of that drop down, it says procedure.
Okay, I'm
you see that?
for that. No, I don't see that.
What's it show over there?
Well, it's got from, to, heading, totals, leg, remaining, and ETA. It's, just your normal flight plan. And above that is just all the things, you select VFR, wings, loft.
Okay, down below, hit edit.
Oh, okay.
Now do you see procedure?
Yes, I do. Got
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Yep.
And Andrew Borden just put in a helpful hint. He said you can also send any chart to map while viewing a chart from the airport info.
Okay.
Do you want to walk through that one?
You could, or when you're looking at a chart from the airport info, that's the same as the charts that I stored in plates.
Yep.
So if I pick a plate here, ILS runway 34 right, up on the right hand side, I got the little box with the arrow coming up. It says send to. I could say send to map. And that'll put it on the map also.
Cool. Andrew,
Man.
thanks. And Ron, thanks for putting that up there like that.
And if I'm at that airport, we'll do it that way too. Let's go down and find, well, here's the airport. So we'll go to procedure here, approach, ILS, see where it says map, send to map there for ILS localizer runway 34. I hit that, boom, that puts it there. There's always multiple ways of getting the same thing. It depends on where you are.
Hey, Ron, how
Yes.
did you add the star approach to your flight pan?
How did I add the star approach?
Yeah,
Oh,
your
you're
Sassy
talking about the
6.
arrival procedure?
Yes.
Okay, and I took it out too, but how did I add it? Okay, again, there's multiple ways you can do it from, I have a binder here that has the arrival procedures in them. So I could go to the arrival procedures, Sassy 6, and hit send to, oh, wait a minute, sorry about that. That doesn't send to the map. Aha. Let's back up. Maybe there's only one way to do this one. If I go to flight plan again and procedure and arrival procedures, and I pick Sassy 6, it shows me Sassy 6 and shows me all the different transitions, TUL or FSM or LIT or whatever. And if I picked FSM and I say add to route, now, as you can see, that stuck that arrival procedure onto my route, starting with FSM all the way down.
Thank you. I looked down and missed which button you pushed. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Hey,
Well,
Ron.
and actually, just 1 second. Andrew Borden also just threw in another good hint, which is you can also tap any airport on the map, select airport details. So once you've selected the airport, select airport details and select the procedure without leaving the map screen.
Correct. You can do that
Cool
too.
deal. All
And
right.
that in flight?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
in flight.
All right.
Right, Andrew?
Yep.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks.
Hey, Ron, this is Alan Cheek. Quick question. So in that, I'm one of these guys that I detest wires running all over my cockpit. So when I'm flying, and I've got my iPad, I don't have a mount for it. So it usually either just sits on my knee or a co-pilot seat or something. But so in my panel, I've got a Garmin 480 WASP GPS. I've got a GDL 88 for traffic and a GDL 69 for data weather link and all that stuff. So I am totally ignorant of the Stratus and everything else. So what I've noticed also before I get in, I guess, is that obviously once I'm up and running, then, if I haven't loaded an approach plate into the binder, for my destination or wherever I want, obviously I can't update anything the air. So with a Stratus, besides getting traffic or whatever, or data link, I mean, what is that doing for you? From a guy that has no clue, I mean, of that, because I get all that info, but I get it from a different source.
Yeah, what the Stratus does is it provides a GPS signal for your iPad.
Okay.
It provides ADS-B in, which is all that information, you know, the weather products and all, you know, TFRs and all those kind of things. And that updates, you know, all the time.
But can you so let's just say all of a sudden you're flying from your airport, D95, to Alliance Field, but the weather, Alliance comes up crazy and you've got to stop in Memphis, okay, international.
Yep.
So obviously you've never been to Memphis International, you don't have the plates, you haven't loaded that, you weren't expecting to go to Memphis International. Can you grab that info because you have a Stratus?
No.
Oh, okay. So you're just like me in that regard.
Yes, whatever. Although when you did the pack, you got everything for Tennessee. You know, when you packed for that flight, you probably got all the Tennessee stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely got, you know, Missouri and Kansas and Arkansas and all that. And if you touched Tennessee at all, you would have gotten those maps too. I typically have everything but Alaska and Hawaii all the time and update every 28 days. I only use my iPad for ForeFlight, so I don't have a bunch of other garbage on it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have room.
Alan, this is Bob. Are you asking for information that the autopilot can use, or are you asking for information that's on the iPad?
I'm just for iPad and using ForeFlight, I guess. So in other words, I just noticed that once like I say, I don't get any traffic on my iPad when I'm using ForeFlight because I have traffic off a Garmin 200 MFD. So I don't. Anytime I want to look at any other offbeat airport, there's a function in the MFD that is called pan, and you just scroll a cursor over to any airport, hit the button, and it'll pull up its weather if it has weather. And then also some basic airport info and stuff. But again, I guess as far as trying to update any kind of approach plate or arrival, if you're going to a totally different place that you never expected, it almost sounds like that there's actually no way to grab that info as far as, am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
I
think that if you've got ForeFlight, at least with the Plus, the better one of the three options.
Right.
Number one, that you got to have that for georeferencing, I believe. But on top of that, if you do that, you've got the NOS charts for every airport in the continental U.S. And it'll georeference over them. Yeah.
Bob, no, you don't. Only if you downloaded them. And let me.
That's my question. So if you haven't downloaded it, you don't.
If you go to downloads here, you have to pick.
Oh, sure. No, yes, sir. I fully agree. But that'll come up and tell you. Yes, I fully agree.
And you do that before.
But it's going to tell you to download.
That's a pre-flight function.
Right.
And you do that before you take off, and it loads it in there.
Yeah.
You guys are all secretly working for Apple and want us to buy upgraded iPads.
You cannot, at this point, you cannot do that while you're flying.
Okay, that's my basic question, I guess. And what is Stratus giving me that I don't
Yeah.
get.
What Stratus
yeah.
gives you, and you may be getting that with your 69, but that's coming through Sirius XM, not through ADS-B.
Yeah.
What Stratus gives you, like what you see on my screen right now, I have traffic, I have weather, and all the stuff I showed you is all available while I'm flying.
Okay.
And all this traffic you see,
And
and
Ron-
then that. Yes, Bob.
Ron, going back to the approach plates, would the old plates still be available? They're just not current?
Oh yeah,
So
there's still.
If you haven't loaded a plate, then you don't have it, and you have no way to get it.
No,
Yeah.
I think the plates are going to be there. They're just not current.
Right, and to know if they're current or not, let's go look at a plate.
Sure, you just
Yeah.
look at the date at the top.
Eddie,
I'm gonna look at one here. There's a number on that plate.
Or
Yeah. You know, see,
There's a
September.
number. There's a date. There's a date at the
10
bottom. And then
September. Yep.
there's a
That's
number that
that's
talks
the
about.
date that plate is current.
Right, but also it also tells you the sequence for that, and you could be 6 months out from the last time you updated it, but if that plate hadn't changed in 6 months, it's still a good plate.
That's correct.
Yep. I do have some information from people who are posting to the chat window that is germane to what we're talking about now. So I want to just read it in, and then add one comment from myself about, well, a question and then a comment about internet access and flight. So let's see. The input is that Stratus. So back to the question. Stratus also gives you backup AHRs, and then a comment. KMAM, whatever that, Andrew Borden, if you're able to unmute, I'm going to read this, but I might need your guidance, or we might need your guidance. He said KMAM, like Kilo Mike Alpha Mike, has
That's
D8s.
Memphis.
Go ahead.
Someone,
Oh, okay, great.
yeah, someone mentioned Memphis, and it has digital ADS. You'll see it on the ground, but I don't think we can get that on ADS-B. I wish we could, because that's the real thing. You don't need to. You can tell approach that you have the numbers. Without having to even
just
switch
to do that in the
frequencies. We can't get that
777,
like the airlines got.
nobody would get a call.
Yeah, I know. The real plane. You can take and get it.
Yep. And so whoever just shared the screen, oh, Ron, well done. So Ron just scrolled to what I was about to read. I'm still going to read it for those dialed in. But Andrew was commenting, he doesn't think we're getting D8s on ADS-BN, although he's wishing and hoping he's wrong, and I guess we're all joining him. He commented that he loads the whole US plates at all times, and then ForeFlight pack function will load the NOTAMs, et cetera, for any airports near your route. Andrew, you want to add anything more to that?
Yeah, I looked up some more. I guess evidently ForeFlight, as was suggested on this forum, may not actually load the place, which is annoying. But then I looked up on their website, their blog, the pack function looks 25 miles either side of your route and a 50-mile radius around your destination, and that will load all the plates in that regime. Interesting, it's not, you can't set it. I know other products over the years let you pick the corridor width, but at least it's something.
Right.
Well, and actually,
so
would that
to
do
that
it for
pack
your
function.
alternate? Oh, cool. Andrew, do you think that it would do it for your alternate airport as well?
If you put it in your flight plan, you should, on ForeFlight, put in your flight plan, and then both airports should pick it up. But the only way to test is to turn off your Wi-Fi and cell and try to load the plate. That's what you should do. And
right.
Well, you can
be sure.
You can go to your your download page and see if it's a plate that you downloaded.
Oh, that's what you can save in advance in your plate section, right? Good idea. You put all.
Even if you pack, let's say I had nothing in here, and I packed for that trip to Fort Worth Alliance, it would show here on my download, those things that got loaded because of the packing. So I can always look in here and see what got loaded and what didn't get loaded.
But it doesn't really load everything. If I select Connecticut, it won't load every plate for Connecticut, even though it says I got it. I guess it's just on the charts, like the VFR and the IFR charts to cover that. It sounds like it. Now I'm getting a little worried, but I've never hit the problem that was mentioned. But why does it have to pack plates? Because I try to pack, and it says.
I think the best thing to do is, if you're going to take a trip like the one out there to Texas, go ahead and download before you start all the states around there, and in your path.
But I tried. I have all the states downloaded. I did a test to some airport in Kansas, and I hit pack, and it said terminal charts is in the list of things to pack, even though Kansas is downloaded according to the download list.
Well, did you load
Yeah, I got everything. I gave Apple as much as I could the last few years ago for no memory. But that's ForeFlight takes that, everything on my machine. But it says I have every state and everything you can possibly download in the download menu. But it still wanted to download plates, so that's annoying. That could be a real gotcha.
Well, it may be because it's got updated plates, updates to already downloaded plates.
Yeah, but he should be up to date. I mean, I've got the.
Yeah, they're 28 days, right? Every 28.
Yes. Yeah.
I think there's some confusion. If you've got Stratus or the equivalent, like I've got the Aporo, there's no need to pack. Everything is available through the Stratus. There's no need to pack whatsoever.
So Appareo and Stratus and Garmin 345 gives you the plates?
Yes, I get every plate for every airport in the United States. I get the weather. There's no need to pack. It will download through the Stratus or the equivalent.
That's what I wanted to know.
I have a Stratus, and I've never seen that plate download feature, but that maybe.
I can go to any airport. Let's say I want to go to a alternate airport. Click on the airport, go to the airport page. I can get the procedures, get the weather, get the plates. It's all there, all through Stratus. So the pack is only if you don't have a download source in the air like a Stratus.
Yeah, Lonnie's right.
Stratus uses ADSB, right? Okay. So the Stratus are using more than ADSB? Or in the air? Okay, well.
ADSB is different. But everything is through Stratus or the equivalent. You don't need to pack if you've got a download source like Stratus.
Got it. That's what I wanted to know. And what does the Stratus cost, just out of curiosity?
Well, I just sold mine for $375 because I now have a Poro transponder with the Stratus built in.
Oh, okay.
And does the portable Stratus, like the Stratus 3 or 2, does that have the same information?
It does. Plus it has AHRS and all that. So it's all the same.
Okay. So for a couple of $100, you can get all that sources assured.
It's $300 extra if you get it built into the Aporo transponder. And I sold my Stratus for $375, so I made $75.
Well done. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
One thing that I want to just mention for folks that are doing any kind of longer legs at all, I'm going to hold this thing up, but these battery packs like this, you can charge them up ahead of time, get a really good one, because an iPad will not make 4 hours if you're using it real hard, for IFR work. And if I think the Stratus is going to make about 6 or 7 hours at the most. So if you start running short, you can plug the battery pack in and keep it going, unless you have an alternate source in the airplane.
One of those options, I just got done with my annual, and I actually added a mid-continent clock because my old clock finally went snafu. But anyways, and it has 2 USB ports right under the clock feature. So, and that mid-continent clock was about $600, $580, something like that.
For those of
Well,
us
one
that
thing
still
that
have,
I've heard is that
go ahead, Andrew.
one thing. Go ahead.
For those of us that still have cigarette lighter sockets in there, there are a number of places you can get cigarette lighter to iPad connections. And also on the iPad, the dimming switch on the top right corner, you'll see something that looks like the sun. That is one of the biggest energy drainers on the iPad, is the brightness of the display. If you dim that down a couple of notches, that will extend the battery life.
Somebody was telling me that you have to be real careful about using that cigarette lighter for these electronic devices because the amps or volts or something aren't correct.
Bob, what happens if you don't have a good converter for charging your iPad is it generates a noise that will interfere with your radios.
Okay.
I bought the one from Sporty's, and it was, and I hooked it to my iPad, and I couldn't hear my radio. It buzzed so loud.
Wow.
So then I ended up spending a lot more money, and I got it through CO Guardian, but now Garmin and Stratus and Avidyne, everybody makes one now that actually replaces your cigarette or cigar lighter with a 2-port USB charge connection. And they're now up around 3 amps each. And you need at least 2 amps to keep your iPad charged.
Okay, I actually, mine, I went to Best Buy, and it turns out I have both a single and a double. And I think it just cost me like $10, $12, something like that. But I haven't noticed any interference on my radio yet. Thank you.
Yeah, if you're not having any interference,
You said that about the radio interference. Go ahead, sorry.
I say you're lucky if you don't have the interference. I did have, and I couldn't find a place to put my iPad that it didn't interfere. And so I just finally threw those away and spent the money and got a good one that filters there's a chopper in there, because they actually do a DC to DC conversion by creating AC and then going back to DC and filtering it. And the filters are much better in the more expensive ones. And I needed that for my combination of radios. Some people, it works fine. Mine didn't.
One other thing that I've learned a couple weeks ago, I've got an Avidyne 550, and it has a USB port on it. So I run 2 iPads in the airplane, one for ADSB and one for weather. And I have the weather one plugged into that USB, and then I've got power off the ship's power to run the iPad that's on the yoke. Well, anyway, my avionics guy said, "Oh my, that's terrible. You can't run that iPad off that Avidyne 550 because it'll ruin the radio." So I don't know why it'll ruin the radio, but anyway, I've quit doing it. So just FYI.
Bob, if it's got a USB port there, I can't imagine what it can do to the radio. You should be able to use it.
Well, me either, and I've run it for a year like that, and the radio's still working. So although I would never tell anybody to buy an Avidyne, because I love the thing as far as the usability, but the communication side of that thing is terrible. And I've got an old KX 155, and with these longer legs, you can't make a trip without losing ATC someplace. And you flip over to the old 175 and it's working like $1 million. Yeah. And I've bitched about it 1,800 times to the avionics guy, and he says, "Well, nothing you can do about it unless you want to give me $5,000, because they got an upgrade on that for $5,000 to get 16 watts.
Oh.
So.
Oh. That's good to know. So I have an answer. I actually just spoke with Avidyne's salesperson, a guy named Chris, on this 2 days ago on the charging port. He said, you can go ahead and charge off your Avidyne's USB port, no problem. That's what it's there for. And so that's the good news. I will pass on to him the feedback on the comm radio being lousy. So, and
I
see
find
whether
that interesting only because I'm that mid-continent and I just got my airplane out of annual. And so I've only flown it one time, but that's exactly what I'm noticing is all of a sudden my radios, I'm getting like this heavy static and I'm like, what the heck is that? So I'm wondering if somehow I'm getting some sort of interference since they added, I don't know if they can add some sort of shielding or what, but it's strange that a clock with a USB port would all of a sudden start affecting my radios. But I tried both of my Garmin's, my 480 and my SL30, and it's anyway, something else to look at now.
Ron might have some comments on that because he's an avionics guy.
This is Chuck. I found out on the USB ports that if you buy one of the better cables, it can make a difference. If you got the real cheap cables, they can give you a lot of noise.
Okay.
That's a good hint.
I mean,
Chuck, what are the better cables? Because I think all of us would want to buy a better cable just because if we take care of it, they'll last a long time, and we would definitely want that to be not a problem in our airplanes. Chuck, what do you buy?
Oh, I don't know. I go like on Amazon or whatever else, but I look for the ones that have the, like the Kevlar shielding and stuff like that on it.
Okay, cool. That's a good hint.
If it's USB 3 compliant, that helps too, because that's 3 amps versus the 2.5.
Right, and I did on that mid-continent unit, I did specify that it was a 3 amp because that was able to sustain the charge on an iPad. So, but anyway, something to look at. Well, if the weather clears, we'll go fly and check it again.
We have a question. What service do you use to get internet access in flight?
I don't get internet access in flight, but I do. In fact, the only access I get in flight is the ADS-B.
Yeah. So there's go ahead.
If I'm low enough, my cell phone may pick something up. I do have ForeFlight on my cell phone as well as my iPad. And the two work together. If I load something on the iPad, it automatically goes to the phone and vice versa.
Right.
And a lot of times I'm at an airport where I don't know how to get onto their Wi-Fi. Then I just use my phone and I transfer whatever I got on the phone to the iPad.
Yep. So, and that was the thing I wanted to touch base on. So I have an iPhone and an Android. Both of them are able to act as portable hotspots. I always have to look it up on the Android, but on the iPhone, if you go to settings, and depending on what version of iOS you're running, you can go down and scroll down just a little from the settings menu at the very top level and click on personal hotspot. That instantly turns your phone into a hotspot that you can connect your iPad to if you don't have its own cellular service or whatever device you're using. And that could be its internet access. So as Ron said, if you're low enough and in the right zone, I don't know how legal this is, but your phone can actually act as a, okay. So then let's just say, don't do this. I did hear a story about a pilot who had a lost comm situation. An ATC figured out that he had a lost comm situation. There was weather in the area and they wanted to reach him to help him. And they called the last airport that he had taken off from, figuring he must have gotten fuel, reached somebody, asked if he had happened to put his mobile number, because he hadn't put it into his flight plan for some reason. asked if the pilot had put his mobile number on like the fuel receipt or something like that, got it, and he happened to have it on, and they were able to reach him in flight and use his cell phone to guide him into wherever the heck he needed to be. So may not be legal, but it's been used by ATC to help pilots.
I want to interrupt here for a moment. We're approaching, in fact, we're at 2 hours worth of presentation. And I'd like to have a chance to finish this up myself and go home. So I am going to leave the meeting, which means that at this point is where the recording will stop. If there's any final comments you want to throw in, do it, and then I'll announce when I quit.
Thanks for all your work on this, Pete.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Thank you, Pete. I just want to, I know there's comments about being able to download charts and approach plates and all that through Stratus. I've never been able to do that, and I've not found anything in the ForeFlight mobile or the Stratus pilot guides that talk about that. And I'm not saying it can't be done. I just have never been able to do that myself.
Why don't we, Ron, what I'm going to do, if it's okay, is I'm going to forward you Cotton's email, and that way you can have the guy that worked for ForeFlight for 2 years.
Yeah,
we'll just put him on the spot.
Is he the one that says you can do that?
No, I think, was that Andrew Borden? Let me go look.
Or there was a Chris, I thought.
No, I'm not a ForeFlight guy. ForeFlight fan, but not ForeFlight employee.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was Christopher Cotton that worked for ForeFlight. So I will get to his email, Ron, and then let's just go find out, and we can.
Yeah, the only thing I've been able to do is I know that ForeFlight will update the firmware in the Stratus, but ForeFlight had to get that upgrade while you had a Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording at this time, and probably